Brion came back with Suki, Poitiers.
Brion returned to Tangier, determined to record the Jujuka in their pre-Roman rites of Pan Festival. Brion Gysin met them at Tangier with his Moroccan partner, Hamri, and drove them up to the village that nestles in an eyrie so acoustically perfect one can hear a dog barking on an adjacent mountain and the waves breaking on the rocks half a dozen miles below. Towards evening, Brion Gysin remembers. Did you speak to him then?
No, never. I've never spoken to any of those people, really any of them. Robert Fraser brought him to my house in Tangier in '67, I guess. He was with Anita at that time, and they came to Tangier, where they joined Mick and Marianne, who were already there, as I remember it, and Keith, at any rate, they all came to my house. Marianne had left. Yeah, she had something to do in London, and so it was Brion and Mick and Keith and Tom, the chauffeur, and Anita, who came to my house. And they were staying at the Minza Hotel, and we went back to the hotel. I remember there was a big fuss about money and changing money and things they wanted to buy and stuff like that. It was then agreed that we would all go next morning to, it was already morning by that time, that we would go to Marrakesh together. So some of them went in Brion's, what did he have? Not a Jaguar, what did he have? A Bentley, yeah, I had a Bentley. And others, we went in a hired car and went to a hotel down there in Marrakesh that next night. And there was a sort of party where Brion went off on his own about some sort of business which I didn't even know about. And they came later and asked me to, the chauffeur came and said, why don't you and Brion go recording in the Highclere? I said, I'll see. Asked me to take Brion out recording on the Jamal Fna, the big square. And it was the chauffeur who told all the lies. But anyhow, when Brion went back, he found that they had all left. Mick had left had given notice that he was leaving. He had to be back at the same time to meet Marianne. And what they were going to do, they were going to take the place of the Queen Mum opening the ballet or the opera or something or another. Something sounded very much at the time and quite ridiculous. And Keith and Anita had split and left Brion in my charge in a state of hysteria, naturally. He thought he was in control until that next night. No, he thought he was very much in control and could do exactly what he liked. He thought he could do what he liked to Anita, too, which is what he couldn't. That's why she split. He was swallowing a fistful of pills. God knows what they were. I didn't know, and I've never known about pills. And he and Anita had been doing things that I didn't like very much, like being photographed in Nazi uniforms and stuff like that. I just thought. And she had written a series of crummy articles called Why I Love Brion Jones or something, which had been published all over the place. So as it all crumbled right in front of my eyes, I thought, ooh, who are these people? When he played the guitar, to my surprise, I found that he could really play it. Complete surprise to me. I considered that none of these rock people had really anything behind them at all. That was all just sort of a PR and very little talent, and I was amazed at his musical talent, yes. Later he went down to Marrakesh and stayed in a house where he destroyed the telephone system out of sheer pique or something or another. Self-centered and selfish boy. And he very much wanted to get in touch with me to find out what his hosts had thought about this. So as soon as he got the information, that's all he wanted from me. I mean, even offer me a drink or say, let's have tea or something, like that. He was very, very, very curt. He was running after. There was some famous English criminal in Tangier in those days with whom he seemed to be infatuated, but I forgot to remember his name. He was not meant to record up there at all. No, he pulled a fast one by phoning and getting George Skians out to do the recording without telling me that that's what he was going to do. Because there was no agreement, and there never was any proper agreement with the musicians, and it was an awful struggle to ever get any money for them. He arrived at the very last moment, just as we got in the car early that morning to drive up to the mountains there. There suddenly was this very, very tall young man, 6'6" or 8", George, with with Uhers actually, rather minor equipment, but it was a long time ago. Uhers were pretty good actually. Well, it just happened, there's no way of stopping it. Well, they were sort of later, Hamre was anxious to, Hamre had a restaurant at that time in a neighboring village south of Morocco, 45 miles away or something like that, where Brion had run up some pretty big bills, and Hamre was very anxious to get paid for those, and found it very difficult to get paid. Brion would say, "Oh, come on back to the hotel with me and I'll pay you." And at the door of the hotel, he said, "Goodbye, Hamre." He and Suki stayed around quite a while in Tangier, several weeks. And talking it over, Burroughs was there too, and he and I talked it over, what should one do about this illicit recording that had been done? Maybe we should do something, and we didn't know what to do. We were completely unarmed against such sort of brigandage. Well, I know that he took the tapes back with him to England, and was later accused by the rest of the Stones, or by some of those people whose business people. He got the chauffeur after Brion died in the swimming pool. The chauffeur ran off with the tapes and took them to Alan Klein. It was very hard to get them back from Alan Klein. And that was much later, but it was also a moment when it all could have been stopped. And at that moment the musicians said, "What do you mean you're discussing whether we should do this or shouldn't?" But of course it's done and we want the money. Don't tell us what it's going to be bad for us or whatever, cultural brigandage. So that, what's it called, less something or other. Those people accused him of having spent a lot of money in the studios reworking the tapes. Lots of phasing and playing backwards and all sorts of superimpositions and stuff like that. Dolbyizing and God knows what all. And they claimed that he'd spent some huge sum of money, like £18,000. It seemed like a lot of money in those days. To me, it still would. So there was a lot of lying around. Then Brion's family lawyer, whose name I can't remember at all, that's undoubtedly in there someplace, said, "What do you mean, musician? That's background noise." Mm-hmm. So there was that sort of attitude, but that was after Brion was dead. Who knows now? One doesn't know. He listened to it often enough and replayed those tapes often enough to get the hang of it, which was more, frankly, than somebody like Ornette Coleman has done until years later. I mean, Ornette told me when I saw him a year ago that he was only beginning to hear the music now, but he did just play over them.
I find it hard to believe he was just going to play on top of it.
Yes, I do too. It's the others who said that. It was the lawyers who said that. I think that, he had it listened to it often enough by that time to begin to understand it. I think that was unfair to him. It was not I who said that, it was they who said that. First of all, as Brion says in the text that goes into the record, he was not there at the time of the festival. He didn't see the actual festival ever. It was a sort of performance that was put on for him by a number of the musicians playing outside the house that belonged to one of them, where we all spent that night and where we had this dinner and actually slept in this man's house. And the house had a porch, and we were sitting under the porch, and the musicians were outside and had a fire. and the goat was sort of led through the group of musicians and seen going by in the firelight. It was really quite phantasmal. And then the rest is true. He did say that. He did recognize it as a sort of figuration of himself. But he himself made a big impression on the musicians. Why is hard to say, but he has become a figure, of course, played up by hearing it from us and hearing it again from Hamri. And then Hamri wrote that song in Jujuka, Brion Jones in Jujuka, Very Stoned, was written by Hamri. I think he's never gotten any money for that either. Doesn't belong to ASCAP. But the picture taken by who? What photographers took that very ethereal photograph that appears on the record? That photograph was for a long time up in Jujuka on the wall there. I don't know if it still is.
Why do you think he has this ability to be a larger-than-life icon?
Oh, that I can't answer. I have to ask him.
It didn't strike you in that way?
No.
Not at all?
No. I thought he was a selfish rock star. And that he pretty well dug his own grave after all. A watery one it was, too.